それ見るの何回目？
だってかっこいいんだもん。
A kid who watches superhero shows on old VHS tapes. Oh, what a boomer. Yeah, I'm so old.
Our new series opened in the mountains where our title character was training and weeping the hell out. This is Tanzaburo Tojima, who we quickly learned was a bit of a Kamen Rider fanboy.
僕もいつか仮面ライダーになりたい。
Well, actually, you'll end up becoming a few belts and guns, but close enough, right?
Also, if you need a proof that this show and the original manga it was based on were made with cooperation from Toei, they outright played the iconic opening theme from the OG series here, and even recreated the opening in anime form, which legit looked pretty awesome to behold, with them, I think, using some rotoscoping from the old show. This of course included the cheesy bubble defeat effects on the kaiju. And yeah, it was legit awesome attention to detail. Though, and they even brought in Hiroshi Fujioka, the original actor of Takashi Hongo, aka Kamen Ichigo, to voice his anime counterpart, who only got this one line here saying "Rider Kick." Yeah, I'm willing to bet he still has at least a few more cameos in the show, but wouldn't it be fun if they called him out of retirement just to record that one line that could have easily been done with archival audio? Anyway, we then jumped a little ahead in time to when Tojima was a 17-year-old high schooler who seemingly scored a love confession from this big-boobed blondie, but it turned out to be a prank.
Okay, so what? Is this gonna lead to him becoming a cringy man-child who's gonna obsess over his favorite superhero and, Oh, he's just gonna walk off from an embarrassing situation. Okay then.
Yeah, almost immediately, they explained how, while he did love Kamen Rider, he also took his love seriously and wouldn't just play it up like a kid's game. Granted, he probably could have played pretend a little with the other kids who were into it, because as a result, he did end up emulating the loner tendencies of the Showa riders a little too much to the point that he didn't have much of a social life.
Emphasis on the show rider stuff, which we will talk about a little more later.
Still, let's be honest, Hongo had a ton of riz, so the blonde chick did actually fall in love with him. However, she also ended up attracting the attention of a rival of her old beau who was a punk from another school. And while Tojima managed to deal with them initially, things weren't going to be resolved that easily, as the punk then later returned with his whole gang to their school. He confronted them after they took Blondie hostage, and again, he surprisingly took things in the most realistic and mature stance by pointing out how these guys were really all just a bunch of punks trying to act like tough guys by declaring war between their schools, when of course they had absolutely no power over anyone.
Now, I do say mostly realistic because... Should they also try to pierce the heavens?
And on that note, reality came crashing down onto Tojima when he tried to take them all on at once, and of course the numbers game played out in the only way it really could have. Still, good on you, dude, you did your best, and other than that evil line, you at least managed to maintain your dignity and...
I don't like where this is going.
Yep, in spite of clearly being outnumbered and having all the crap beat out of him, Tojima stood up and, in his words, decided to henshin.
Now you see, this is what happens when you don't splurge for those belt extensions. Though, personally, I just use electrical tape, as it also helps to make the Deno belt looks complete.
Still, I guess that was enough to get his adrenaline pumping, and he managed to wipe out all of the thugs. Well, okay, good for you, dude. Now you can claim the hand of the girl you saved, and oh right, we're still living in reality, and girls don't often go for violent cringe lords. Welp. As a result, Tojima really started to embody the Showa Rider spirit by becoming a very much lone hero shunned by society. The saddest part that he was still a realist at heart who knew that Kamen Riders and their enemies really didn't exist. And yet, by basing so much of his personality on them, he couldn't entirely separate from them even as he entered into adulthood.
Make me into an allegory for the Japanese bubble economy!
Also, the insert song that played here, Rider Rider, was really awesome, though we'll talk more about the music in the show a little later, as they are mostly all done by the same artists. Anyway, Tojima's scream ended up attracting the attention of one of the residents of the mountain.
If you're looking for Bear Conger, he's a little higher up in the snowy mountains.
And yet, kaiju or not, Tojima had a pretty damn impressive exchange with Smokey that he actually won. Yeah, the dude just beat a frickin' bear. I think you're at least on Riderman level, if not higher. And this was in spite of his age that we learned was 40. And this would end up becoming a little more significant in the next scene, as he went off to sell off all of his Kamen Rider merch, which fortunately for him, there was a used toy store nearby they could go to. Though he wasn't really doing it because he needed the money or anything, but rather because if he happened to pass away the next day, he'd hate it if they end up cleaning out his apartment and throwing them all away.
Yeah, I know that feeling, considering that I've been trying to sell off some of these old Power Rangers toys that I just got off storage. I'll get to that stuff later.
But yeah, looking at Tojima's collection does actually highlight a few important details about this character and maybe the show. First and foremost was the fact they seem to be most obsessed with the original two riders, Ichigo and Nigo, with their goods taking up the lion's share of space, including being the Oni Henshi belts he had on display. Now, he did have merch of the other Showa riders, but not nearly as much, especially in regards to the latter riders like the Blacks and the movie riders, who I think he only bought these figures out of obligation. To me, that suggests they kind of fell out with this franchise after it went off the air for about a decade in the 90s, and didn't really return even when the Heisei era began, hence why he doesn't have a Heisei or Reiwa Rider merch. And yes, the show does seem to take place at least close to modern day, as they have flat screens and smartphones, like maybe at the earliest this is the late 2010s. It would explain why he seemed to mostly watch the OG Kamen Rider through tapes rather than live, as the OG series aired in 1971, and since he's 40, he was more likely born in the late 70s to early 80s.
TLDR, this guy is a Showa fanatic who's really missing out on the greatness of Kamen Rider Kuga. What I watched in my childhood, and what I watched in my adulthood. Yeah, this is why the show really speaks to me.
Of course, another possibility is that Kamen Rider never came back in 2000, which would be the worst timeline, as we would miss out on a lot of good stuff. Anyway, one night, he found an article about robbers who seemed to be Shocker, the enemy of the OG Riders, but they were just regular robbers parodying them, and apparently wanted to be cancelled. I mean, just look at their hand gesture, and also who their great leader was.
Oh, hi, Pot. Say, have you gotten to know the kettle well?
I mean, okay, to be fair, this is in line with his character, as we have seen that even if he is a rider fanatic, he does maintain a fairly grounded view of the world. Part of that might have been due to his father going out for cigarettes, as I think this flashback very subtly hinted at. Really, the fact that he's this well-adjusted of an adult speaks strongly about his character. Certainly a lot more than these wannabe Yakuza who became wannabe Shaka troopers because of orders from their boss.
Well,
that makes sense, considering you have played way more kaiju than your one Kamen Rider role.
But yeah, they were the original robbers who started the Shaka trend and were now terrorizing a poor takoyaki vendor. Seeing an innocent old man being bullied awoke something in Tojima, as well as started up an awesome cover to Let's Go Rider Kick, the opening to the OG series. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about the music. So, instrumentals for this song were done by Teddy Sakigabara, aka Teddy Lloyd, who's best known for doing the music to the Me 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 music video, as well as a certain iconic tune that made a hell of a comeback recently. So, needless to say, this was an amazing rendition to easily one of the most famous tokusatsu themes of all time. And it matched perfectly with Tojima's epic beatdown of the Shocker Yakuza, as he rightfully teared up when he got to live out the dream that he absolutely deserved. Also, mad props to Katsuyuki Konishi here, who really started to sound like Hiroshi Fujioka. It really highlighted how Tojima was becoming one with his idol, which was a perfect way to close out this episode as he ran off to avoid the cops. However, we think also got a bit of a stinger with the deuterogonist of the show, who we will talk more about her and the character she was trying to emulate next week, but for now, we'll just say this.
お面だけの仮面ライダーって冗談じゃない。
For you, I think you should first sort out which precure color you are. Is it gold or is it purple? Anyway, this was a fantastic first episode. Much like Tojima, the show really highlighted its love for the Kamen Rider franchise and never really came off as overly cynical at any point. Sure, it had its goofier elements, but they never really made fun of the franchise that has meant a lot to many over the years.
I think a common problem that many of these shows and comics about normal people who tried to emulate costume superheroes that they admired was how they tend to play up the goofier nature of their stories to the point that it not only becomes cynical but also kind of mean-spirited. The point that creators like Stan Lee and Shotaro Ishinomori were trying to get across was the idea that true heroism comes from those who want to make a difference and defend people from the many natural injustices of the world. This was why I almost instantly fell in love with Tojima, as he was trying to emulate just those great ideals. Could he go overboard and even be a little cringy? Absolutely, but only really when he needed that little moral boost to do the right thing, and not just be a reckless idiot like Kick-Ass, who, yeah, that was meant to be a more cynical take on superheroes by a very cynical comic book writer. His passion for Kamen Rider was not only felt through his fights, but also through little things like selling off his merch just so that they could find better homes, and in general, being a chill and cool guy because really, that's what most writers are like on their off time. And this is even further highlighted thanks to some great music and animation in this first episode. Again, there's just clearly a lot of passion put into this show to really get across the respect a franchise that has gone on for this long deserves. And overall, this is just a fantastic start to a new series. There will inevitably come a time when the writers will have to ride off into the sunset, but as long as there are determined and slightly cringy fans out there like Tojima, then their legends will never truly die.
Thanks for watching what is going to be replacing our Sunday morning uploads, at least for a little while. Yeah, I do kind of want to pace myself out a little more these days, just to make editing and sleep a lot easier. But still, do look forward to Idol Precure tomorrow. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and... Ah shoot, I gotta put more money on this pass.